I suggest that we all try to get a seat. It shouldn't be very complicated. Those of you who are in the back, feel free to get closer. The closer you are, the more engaged in the session you'll be. There are a number of sessions running in parallel. I know that some of the speakers also have to jungle between parallel and sometimes conflicting, as in this case, sessions. So we'll be showing a lot of flexibility for doing so. I'd like to thank you all very much for being here. My name is Aziza Akmouche. I work for the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, where I'm in charge of the division that deals with cities, urban policies, and sustainable development. And I've been in charge until then. Many of you probably know me under that hat of the OECD's water governance program. So it's really a pleasure to be here. We have a big challenge because we have a fascinating topic, and I think some of the discussions, for those of you who were in the previous round on the water dialogue, were very much connected to issues we're going to address here, because the local dimension and a number of issues related to capacity were brought in by several of the speakers. But we have two challenges. One is that we have great minds that are going to take the floor, something like 17 speakers. And in parallel, we have very limited time because we're all trying to make sure we're done around 4:30. Maybe we can take an extra 5 minutes so that we are in a position to report back to the plenary some of the takeaway messages of this session. So there are very strict rules of the game. All my dear guests have been way briefed upstream about the necessity to be concise, precise, while remaining relevant, which I know is not an easy task, but I really do count on all of you to help me help you deliver on time so that we make sure we can actually report back to our colleagues and connect some of the takeaway messages of this session with what is being said in parallel in the two other roundtables. I'm setting the scene, but I know several of the institutions that will come, and in particular some of the colleagues that will be doing the keynotes will also set the scene. So I won't give too much on that side, but I wanted to say a few things to frame the discussions based on what we have actually been looking at the OECD when dealing with cities and water over the past decade. The first one is that we know, of course, water demand is going to increase by 50% by 2050, and this will mean fierce competition, including for urban dwellers. We know that 4 billion people will be living in water-stressed areas. We've seen actually cities, Brazil is a very good example, and we'll have a representative in the panel, that have a rather high concentration of fresh water worldwide, 12% in the case of Brazil, and that have had their biggest cities, Rio and Sao Paulo, in this case, gone through one of the worst drought crises in history in more than 80 years. So we see that this discussion about too much, too little, and too polluted water, and also the parallel discussion about how you make sure that the current levels of service delivery and water security are preserved in the future, is something that doesn't go through a rich-poor divide. And you have both developed and emerging economies that have serious water risks to deal with and to cover over the years to come, and a number of other cities in developing countries that still have a lot to do to actually catch up. And I think that's in terms of the global risks and what needs targeted public policy action, a very important point. And then there are probably two issues, I'm taking it from the hat of someone that works on cities, that are related to urban development and that many of the countries are actually struggling with, and that may not implicitly connect to water, but that are intrinsically connected to water. And I think these are related to the discussions on inclusive growth and the discussions on the scale. And we've seen quite a big evolution in the different countries about the inclusive growth dimension, what we call the geography of discontent, where we see that the impact of the economic crisis, of the lack of trust of governments that are very much place-based, have generated an opportunity opportunity for some local and regional governments to step up where central governments are stepping back. And I think typically on climate, this is a very good way to illustrate how in the United States, amongst others, governors and mayors have really shown a leadership to bridge the gap of a political commitment at national and federal level. And this discussion of inclusive growth is actually very much connected to the SDGs, where you see the huge spillovers of water and cities on the other dedicated goals and targets. And more than 18 targets are actually water-related, more than these are city-related, and that really shows that shared responsibility across levels of government. The second and last thing is related to the scale, and I think there I would really like to emphasize that maybe the water community, and that's true, it was said in the previous session, that tends to talk to itself and is not always very connected to the decision makers outside the water box, has made quite a pioneer breakthrough in this area, in the issue of scale, because we have long been saying that you cannot manage water following only administrative boundaries. When you have rivers, lakes, aquifers, they go much beyond administrative boundaries of cities. And I think the full basin governance paradigm has gone in this direction. But at the same time, we're seeing now, in particular from OECD countries, a trend where city leaders realize that this functional approach to urban policies is relevant to many more areas than water. When you talk about transport, when you talk about housing, when you talk about a number of cities that just don't stop at the boundaries of what falls within the remit of the mayor, you need to have this scale that helps compare what is comparable. And we've been doing some work over the past 5 years to develop a methodology that can compute what we call these functional urban areas based on where people live and work. And that's the scale at which public policies need to be thought. And I think that in our discussion about how we connect economics, inclusiveness, and place-based dimensions of urban resilience, that's something that we'll look at more closely. So we have, as I said, 3 moments in this session. We'll have a first series of keynotes. I guess the presentations were shared with the logistics. We'll be starting, and it's my pleasure to invite on stage our first keynote speaker, Catherine Lure, Vice Mayor for the Environment of the City of Stockholm, for a 7-minute presentation to the audience to set the scene. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. Let's see if this works.
Okay, for the moment we have black. But there is no screen for now.
Which one? This one?
To switch the order while they fix this.
Okay, yeah. Okay, hello everyone. As a mayor of environment, of course, I'm proud that Stockholm is seen as a frontrunner in environmental and climate work. Stockholm is often seen as a model city in the world, and I believe that it's really important for us and for other cities to discuss different solutions together to become more and more sustainable for each year. I'd like to present how the main climate risks of Stockholm looks like. Our current main challenge is increased rainfall, flooding from our lake, and heat waves during the summer. In a 50 to 100-year perspective, we will face the consequences of a sea level rise. To meet those risks, we now learn from cities like Rotterdam, London, and St. Petersburg about flood walls. Today, I will address stormwater primarily because it's our most urgent problem in Stockholm. Waste management planning dates back to the 70s in Stockholm, and when the first water management plan was adopted in the city council. Since the 70s, the water qualities in surrounding waterways of Stockholm has improved, mainly because centralized solutions for water treatment. Management of water bodies in Europe is regulated mainly by the Water Framework Directive. And we base our work on the Water Directive framework of good ecological and chemical status in Stockholm. We currently develop specific action plans for each of our 23 different water bodies. Regional collaboration is key since upstream work is more cost-effective than cleaning a lake. We must collaborate more in governance of our waters, both locally, but also regionally, nationally, and globally, since water has no boundaries. Stockholm has the ability, unlike many other cities, to regulate how land is used. Since we own our land in Stockholm, we are able to put demands on all actors building in the city. Today, we give points on how much urban ecosystems are created or developed, as well as putting demands on energy efficiency and stormwater management. Stockholm is one of the fastest growing capitals in Europe, and it's necessary to have the Stockholmers on board when we do all the work we do in the city. The citizens of Stockholm is deeply involved in their city. 7 out of 10 is interested in environmental issues and believe the city should impose requirements on its residents with regards to living more environmentally friendly. We engage and involve our citizens in many aspects of environmental efforts. This year, for example, we made a cost-benefit analysis of the value of our waters. We saw a lot higher will to pay than the actual cost of improving the status of our water bodies. People are willing to pay at approximately double the amount that we plan to pay for cleaning all our waters in Stockholm. And these kinds of calculations are necessary for long-term planning and politics. I want to mention nature-based solutions as well. Stockholm is a green city. Now I'll see if I can show you a picture of Stockholm. No, I cannot. Okay. But it is a green city with a lot of water around that you may see in a later picture. The main waterways that divides the city is surrounded by 20% of green areas. We are working hard to maintain the green areas with permeable soil to be able to accommodate stormwater better. We also base our new stormwater strategy on ways of handling water that copies the way nature takes care of rainwater. This is only one of our low-tech nature-based services that I find important to highlight. Another more innovative low-tech solution is the old technique of improving the soil with so-called biochar. And I would have liked to show you another picture of that, but maybe you can have that later. In the Biochar project, we use garden waste. Oh, here. We use garden waste, making biochar that helps trees to grow, cleans the water, and retain the carbon in the ground for hundreds of years ahead. However, this method will not be used as an excuse to not set ambitious goals for mitigation, but the Stockholm Biochar project is a potential nature-based carbon sink when going full scale. We all know that the ocean's capacity to buffer carbon dioxide is decreasing and is reaching a tipping point. To be able to reach our goals, we will need more carbon sinks in the city, and we think that the Biochar project is one of the most important ones at the moment. The biochar has the fantastic ability not only to lock carbon, it also acts as a soil improvement and purifies stormwater and helps plants and trees in the city to develop. Urban nature will be pivotal to provide climate regulation, shade, and hamper flooding, and help cleaning stormwater before it reaches our waterways. The cities needs to be involved in planning and setting laws regarding to climate adaptation. I see challenges in who should pay for adaptation measures. At least in Sweden, we need clearer laws on this. Nature-based solutions and stormwater management is an important and as other parts of sustainable urban planning and should be regulated likewise. Here we also see challenges in the Water Framework Directive, which is not always fit for the city's solutions. So I would finalize my speech with some lessons that we have learned in Stockholm. We believe that we all have to collaborate in the water catchment area. We share our lakes with other municipalities. The planning should involve everyone. We also share our ocean. That is why the Swedish Minister for Climate held the important ocean conference in New York together with Fiji this spring. We need to involve the citizens. Without the citizens on board, you will never excel the results. And lastly, take care of our water. Both citizens and nature will thank us for that, and so will future generations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and also for the flexibility, Vice Mayor, given the technical hiccups. That's a good challenge for the next ones. Let me now invite Katie Oak, councillor from Melbourne City in Australia, and also representing ICLEI for her 7-minute intervention. If you can, better.
You're doing an amazing job, Aziza. I know that there is a lot of people to manage, so I'll see if I can speak faster and that the technology might work. But I'm very pleased to be here to represent ICLEI and also the City of Melbourne in Australia. ICLEI is a global network of 1,500 cities and towns, large, small, and we're all committed to building a sustainable future, and hopefully many of you come from cities and regions that are represented by ICLEI. As we've already heard today, and I'm sure we'll hear from many, many people, water is obviously pivotal to urban development and will be the defining resource in our shared future. As Aziza has said, this presents a major challenge for our cities. It also presents a unique opportunity to plan and build resilient, water-wise cities of the future. We need to plan for water in adaptive and innovative ways, taking into account climate change. But most importantly, we must foster the local partnerships that we've already heard of today. In the City of Melbourne, I'm very proud that we do work very closely not only with our community, with our universities and key stakeholders to develop our innovative local solutions. And like we've just heard from the City of Stockholm, this co-design, true engagement approach has been critical actually to our success. Because we're working with the people who know the city and can provide us with really great local solutions. If this works, I've got a very busy slide on the screen here. It's actually one of my favourite slides. It is busy for a reason, because the City of Melbourne has done a lot of work over many, many years, in particular around water, but around climate adaptation and resilience. And we've taken an integrated water management approach, and we believe that that is critical to not only climate adaptation but resilience goals. And you can see at the top of our strategy pyramid, or it's sort of a pyramid, is climate adaptation and resilience. They're at the top of everything that we do. And then you'll also see that it's an ecosystems, nature-based solution approach for everything that we're doing around climate adaptation and mitigation. Maybe not everything, but a lot of what we're doing is being driven by a holistic ecosystem approach, and water is key to that, because we know that if we can manage stormwater and green roofs, rooftop infrastructure really well, we can significantly reduce floods in our city. And we also know that if we reuse and use water in a targeted, much more efficient way, we can maintain our urban forest. And we have a goal to double our canopy in the City of Melbourne by 2040, and this will reduce the heat in our city, the temperature in our city in summer, where we're already experiencing high, long heat waves. It will reduce it by 4 degrees in the summer months if we can achieve the doubling of the canopy. But importantly, understanding the city as a catchment, even though it is this big jungle, this big urban jungle, if we can understand the natural water flows that still exist, you just don't know it often, if we can also manage it in that way, we can reduce flooding, we can also obviously get a lot more benefits, a lot more benefits from this infrastructure. But in closing, because I know that we're running out of time already, I'm really mindful that I'm giving an example, and this slide represents, and actually I did have another slide, this technology that we have employed in the City of Melbourne costs a lot of money. I stand here you know, as an ICLEI representative, as a city that is developed, where we have access to amazing intellectual resources and money in our city. And I know that, but the reason why I'm here at the COP23, why I am here representing ICLEI, is on behalf of my developing cities friends. You know, the network that we represent is here. We're here on behalf of the cities in our network to advocate for access to technology and to finance, to ensure that all cities can adapt in the way that we're adapting in the city of Melbourne through infrastructure like this, and that so that we can all make sure that we've got access to clean water, but also that we're managing the increased floods and storms that we're going to see in the future because of climate change. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Katie, also for helping us with time. Actually, it's been half of your allocated time. I think the message was very clear. I would like now to invite our third speaker, Jean-Didier Berthaud, who's representing the Greater Paris Authority and the Mega Cities Alliance. I'm being told that Jean-Didier has slides, so we're all good. Perfect. You have the floor for 7 minutes.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. I'm very pleased to speak just after my colleagues from Stockholm and Melbourne, so we'll have a little bit of fresh, no, not fresh, fresh, I hope, French accent, to speak about Mega Cities Alliance. And first, to present perhaps Mega Cities Alliance, a few words about what we can say, because in 1970s, the United Nations identified 3 megacities, and this number increased to 31 in 2016. And according to projection, 10 more cities will enter this category by 2030, all located in the world's least developed countries. And Mega Cities Alliance is part of the overall framework of the Global Alliances for Water and Climate, and facilitates dialogue on water through which megacities will learn from each other's experience, exchange best practices, partners with appropriate technical, academic, and financial institutions, as well as design and implement their individual responses and to the challenges of climate change. So you can see in the slides over there 3 concrete examples of what we have started to organize between several megacities. The first about urban floods, the second about sea level rise, and the third about water scarcity. So you have 3 groups, 3 different groups and regional groups coordinated by a UNESCO team, and I would like to thank them for the work all around the world. And during the last year, we have organized the relations between the 3 pillars of the Alliance, coordinated so by UNESCO, which are policymakers and civil society, water and wastewater utilities, and academia and research center. And we have at government level UNESCO IHP, so International Hydrological Program, setting up a working group involving experts nominated by member states. We have a water and climate database for megacities of today and tomorrow under construction with a water information network system, and concrete projects in Beijing, Mexico, and Manila. Perhaps few words before conclude about these 3 megacities, because in Beijing, we have best practices about Sponge City in Tongzhou district and tools for stormwater management. The second topic, which deals with the flow management and the experience of SIAP, which is the Greater Paris Sanitation Authority, important in this field and oriented on urban flood and real-time control. And in Mexico City, with Mexico City Cooperation Project of Basin Management and Adaptation to Climate Change, including stormwater drainage, and to highlight necessary work between the alliances, because this project in Mexico City is with Basin Alliance. And the third and last one with Manila and cooperation to help clean part of the 27-kilometer passing river. So we have a pilot there to start with that. So next steps to conclude. We have the participation in international events last June in Cancun for IWRA Congress. Obviously, World Water Week in Stockholm. I love Stockholm. Very green city with a lot of water around. No picture, sorry. And after meeting with ABRH in Brazil and next in 2 days in Buenos Aires for the South America platform with Mexico and Sao Paulo. So to conclude, we have a regional approach is engaged since megacities from a greater region often share environmental, cultural, legal, climate and institutional similarities. And the Alliance, Megacities Alliance, is based on a story to encourage collaboration between the three pillars as a model of efficiency and sustainability, sustainable results. And so enhancing urban resilience by raising awareness and sharing case studies, experiences, best practices, and innovative solutions for engaging the adaptation to new risks. So if you are members of megacities present here, so don't hesitate and join us now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jean-Didier. I've not seen David Stevens. Is David in the room? Okay, David, I've not seen you. Please join us. You're representing the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction. You have 7 minutes.
Also, I apologize I'm late. I've run out of another meeting room. I didn't intend to be late. I wanted to focus perhaps a bit on the work the Office for Disaster Risk Reduction is doing regarding Sendai and the links between Sendai and climate change, and of course the impact of water at the local level. I have actually prepared something in writing, because I know I want to keep to the 7 minutes, and hopefully I'll read fast enough, less than 7 minutes. So first of all, I want to thank the organizers for the opportunity to address everyone this afternoon, touching on a topic of the Sendai framework, and also on water and urban resilience. And as I want to be brief, I've just put together some points as a contribution to this session. We live in a world where disaster risk is growing faster than GDP in many countries. Disasters push 26 million people into poverty every year, and the cost of the global economy is 20 billion, according to the latest estimates from the World Bank. Over the past 2 decades, 1.35 million lives and $2.5 trillion have been lost to disasters. Each year, disasters plunge an additional 26 million people into poverty. The average annual loss from disasters in less developed countries equates to over 20% of their average annual social expenditure. And these costs are escalating rapidly because of a failure to incorporate risk in economic investments, and most fundamentally because of climate change. The Sendai framework is a roadmap which sets out the guiding principles and priorities for action to face this reality. The Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction was adopted 2 years ago by UN member states as a non-legally binding agreement designed to reduce disaster losses, to reduce existing levels of risk, and more importantly, to include the consideration for future risks. It was the first framework of the 2030 Global Development Agenda. The other key frameworks adopted since then, including the Paris Agreement on Climate and the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, all acknowledged the importance of disaster risk management as an essential feature of sustainable development. The vast majority of major disasters are climate-related, and these events, flood, drought, and storms, have doubled over the last 4 decades. And it's estimated that by 2050, the urban population exposed to hurricanes will increase from the current 310 million people to 680 million people. Urban assets vulnerable to sea level rise and flooding could reach $35 trillion by 2070, 10 times more than the current levels. Disaster risk reduction contributes to reducing the vulnerability of communities to hazards and safeguards development gains. A key DRR and climate change area we should be focusing on are the upcoming 2020 targets, which include the finalization of the National Adaptation Plans, NAPs, as well as the national and local disaster risk reduction strategies by 2020 under Target E of the Sendai framework. It's a key area where, as UNSDR, are focusing on is bringing together the development of NAPs, both at the national, mainly at the national, but also at the local level, and the Target E, which is the first target to, should be implemented by member states in 2020. It's a golden opportunity to ensure a holistic approach to overall disaster risk management, which ensures that climate change adaptation is integrated into national planning for reducing disaster losses, alongside measures to strengthen implementation of land use regulations, enforce the building codes, protect the environment, halt deforestation, upgrade informal settlements, and raise the public awareness and understanding of disaster risk. The Sendai framework highlights the need for good governance and disaster risk reduction at the local, national, regional, and global level. At the local level, we at UNSCR will continue our support to local governments through the Making Cities Resilience campaign, which aims to support sustainable urban development by promoting resilience activities and increasing local level understanding of disaster risk. A 10-point checklist of essentials for making cities resilient serves as a guide for cities' commitment towards improving their resilience, and it is the organizing principle for reporting and monitoring during the campaign. Today, we have actually over 3,000 cities worldwide that have made a commitment to build resilience at the local level as part of this campaign. The Sendai framework encourages local governments, the private sector, and civil society organizations to work together on the design and implementation of disaster risk reduction plans as a matter of urgency. The first deadline, as mentioned, is to have in place the local risk reduction strategies, which, if done successfully, will result in increased economic, social, health, and environmental resilience. And this includes also the need to develop building and infrastructure standards to address climate and disaster risk in order to guide future investments by the private and the public sector, as well as the importance of inclusive governance mechanisms enforcing the implementation and accountability. And thank you very much. I hope I kept the 7 minutes.
Thank you very much, David, and very interesting to hear your point about the 3,000 cities that have committed to the framework. Actually, I'm learning that. I knew very much about the uptake of the Sendai framework, and we followed the work through our high-level risk forum at the OECD, but it's very interesting to see that this is trickling down in terms of the political commitment at the local level, as other global agendas have as well. So thank you very much, and also to our 3 other keynotes for playing by the rules of the game. We're back on track, not doing that bad. The half an hour is good. I will now invite the panelists of the first roundtable to join me on stage, and while they're doing so, I'll say a few things about how we're going to work. So the first one I have is Will Kam, the mayor of the city of Tuttlingen in Germany, if you would like to join us. I then have Bertrand Camus, Deputy Director General for Suez Water Europe and Director General for Suez France. Welcome. I have Stéphane Reuter, the Executive Director of Borda. Do we have Stéphane? Excellent. Welcome. I have Mark Fletcher, who's heading the Global Water, do we say practice department at Arup in England. And then I invite France Marie, Head of Division for Water and Urban Development and Mobility within BMZ in Germany. And last but not least, Kobe Brandt, who's the Regional Director for ICLEI in Africa. So as you see, we have tried to keep a bit of a multi-stakeholder dynamics in the discussions. The idea now is really that we dive into 3 cross-cutting issues that this roundtable and others are going to address when it comes to looking at water and urban resilience in our case, which are issues related to governance and the capacity and the soft infrastructure and everything that can allow the enabling environment, including to catalyze the needed finance. Issues that are more connected to the nature-based solution, and I think there was a very good point this morning about it not being a substitute to the traditional grey infrastructure that we need, but a complement to it that can also foster some policy complementarities, and issues related to the private sector and business engagement, because I think we're all making a very strong point here that governments, whether they're at central or local level alone, will not meet it in terms of their NDCs. And there is a need for a shared responsibility that goes much beyond the public sector. So I'm very happy to have our panelists with us. The rule of the game is that you have 2 to 3 minutes each. I have a chronometer. You can make your statement ideally from the chair, but if you are more comfortable here, that's absolutely no problem. You have mics nearby, and I propose that we keep the order and start with the mayor that can give us some introduction based on his city, and if you can also introduce your city in the environment. So I'm not sure all of us know actually where Tuttlingen is located in Germany. So I understand there is an interpretation going on in parallel, right? So you will do it, and we'll try to keep it short. Mayor, you have the floor.
Hello, and I said some words black to black that my mission and my English is not very well, and so I need a translation.
Okay, and I have the honor to speaking for Willy Kamm, the mayor of the city of Tuttlingen in Germany today. I was just asked of it, so I hope I present his opinion and his statement well, but I will try. So Tuttlingen, for those of you who don't know where Tuttlingen is located, is a small city in Germany with about 35,000 inhabitants. It's in the Black Forest in Germany, so it's Baden-Württemberg, right? I don't know the translation anyway, neither. And we know that this today is about water and climate, but still we shouldn't forget about culture and the cultural value of rivers and water. And so, yeah, we should not forget the important or vital role culture can play in finding solutions to address the problem. And let me share the really small story of Tuttlingen. So 155 days of the year, the water, so Tuttlingen is located close to the Donau, and the Donau just seeps into the ground and leaves a dry river bed. So that happens 155 days a year. And here's the idea to share this experience with all the other cities close to the Donau, from the Black Forest to the end of the Donau in the Black Sea in Romania and Ukraine. And yeah, that's the initiative you talked about. It's Black to Black, and it's about exchanging experiences.
Thank you very much, Mayor, and to your colleague for helping us with the translation. I'll now move to Bertrand Camus.
So good afternoon to everyone. I just wanted to speak a little bit about how digital revolution can help improve resiliency of cities and also mitigate the impact of events such as storms and flooding. This is something that is really developing fast and really helping to manage those situations. Basically, what we see is that the basic infrastructure is done or is created to protect first people, then protect properties, but not to protect the environment. And in a world of scarcity, we really need to enter into thinking of circular economy, which means that when we dispose of this excess of water, we need to think about the fact that this water will have to be used later on, either to produce, to consume, or to bath, just to take an example. So we have been developing those smart operation center in a lot of cities. We started in France in the Bordeaux area, which was very much exposed to flooding. In the Paris area with the SIAP, where there is a system that has been designed to manage those areas with Paris. And basically the ideas are very simple. Is one, to be able to control, so have the information gathered and make sure that the quality and the quantity is under control. Two is to be able to remotely operate. When it rains in a city, it never rains with the same intensity everywhere, so you can move the water from one part to the other using the tunnels and the storage facilities, and therefore better using it and also optimizing the cost of the investment. And then the third dimension is to have predictive models where we are crossing data from the knowledge of the system, meteo, anticipation of rain, and with that we can even anticipate the intensity of the event few hours or few days before and get prepared for the event. The second dimension is people. I was in North America at the time of Sandy superstorm, and we had two major issues to manage the crisis with our water operation. One was the lack of gasoline, and the second was the lack of communication. And it was amazing to see that people were able to connect through social networks because cable were still functioning. And you see that social networks are a very good way of alerting people, giving them information of where they can access to water, for example, but also getting back information from the people if they notice something rare about a building, about a person, and ask the emergency crews to intervene. And the last comment is we have been speaking this morning about traditional infrastructure and nature-based solution. I think that the solution will be a combination of the two, and digital also can be a bridge between the two. We are developing amazing new technologies. Just to give you 2 examples. For example, we are using more and more drones to use thermal cameras and look at the difference of temperature and see if there is a leak somewhere. And the last we are very proud of is about biodiversity, listening to fishes in the ocean as a marker of diversity, and make sure instead of sending someone a diver to count the fish, that we can hear them and make sure that they are there.
Thank you very much, Bertrand. I liked your point. Actually, there's more and more OECD countries that ask for understanding the connection between the 4th industrial revolution and how we're building the cities of the future. And I think this ICT-driven, but also looking at the policy implications in terms of taking decisions and engaging citizens is a very interesting way forward. Moving from data to indicators, I'll give the floor to Mark Fletcher from Arup. You have a big initiative ongoing on a resilience index. If you could please introduce it to us.
Yeah, so I really wanted to share with you our thinking around assessing the water resilience of cities. And the first thing you need is a sort of a framework of understanding. Aziza said in her introduction, it's very important that we think of that at a basin scale, but some cities depend on a number of basins like Mexico, so you have to consider those interconnections. And that framework hosts a water cycle, so very much just being in tune with the natural systems. We can flex that cycle, too much or too little water, with shocks and stresses or extremes. So Cape Town's experiencing an extreme of too little water at the moment. Copenhagen had a shock of a sort of 1,000-year storm too much. But what's also important across that cycle is that we understand the governance across that cycle and who's responsible and who's, from a sort of primary and secondary perspective, as we look at the various elements of that cycle when it gets flexed. We can learn from previous work on the City Resilience Framework and the City Resilience Index that 100RC and Rockefeller have worked on. We need to share knowledge of what's worked, and we have to share, I think it was a point made earlier today, really try and get into what hasn't worked, but always remember that a city's context, its culture, it's unique, and that's really important. And I'd just like to finish by saying our future cities will be bluer and they will be greener, and I think they'll be great places to live. And hopefully they'll be more resilient. Thank you.
And if they're not, then you can show it, actually, with this new index. Very promising piece of work. Thank you very much. I now move to Mr. Franz Marie. You have actually a portfolio within BMZ, which is very interesting because it's combining water, urban development, and mobility. And I checked actually pretty much the same scope at the OECD's division that is looking at transport, urban, and water. And I'm very curious to hear how you connect the dots also with your constituencies.
Yeah, thank you. Well, actually, until 3 years ago, it also included energy and mining.
So you lost those.
Also 2 extremely water-related topics. No, thank you. Yes, Franz Marie from the German Development Ministry. I imagine most of you sitting here are either water or hopefully climate community. I'm talking for the urban community now. And therefore, let me first of all start with a figure, which the urban community knows, but possibly is not really known here. By 2050, more than 2/3 of the world population will live in cities, and there will 2 billion more people on the planet. They have to be accommodated. Cities are the key units for economic, social, cultural, whatever development. 70% of global GDP is produced in cities, but also 70% of greenhouse gases. So the climate challenge can only be solved through cities. Action in urban centers is thus essential to successful global climate change, adaptation and mitigation, because cities are producers, but they are at the same time victims as well. At the same time, I would say we have been talking about disasters, water-related disasters which come from climate change, but we should also look at the topic of integrated water resource management. In cities, we're talking about fresh water, freshwater consumption, but the big threats are for the well-being of the people are also sanitation and drainage. These issues need also action, and we should therefore look a little bit beyond the mere climate perspective, because let's say all these measures have a very direct and strong impact on climate, but they go beyond. So I think let's not only discuss climate financing, but discuss development. And my personal, as I said it in the other meeting already, I feel we should first discuss what we want to have, and then we discuss how we can do it, and finally we discuss what can we afford. We had the big Habitat 3 conference last year in Quito, which was, they call it the first, let's say, concretization of the SDGs for the urban area. And one of the key messages of Germany, and I'm very happy to see a mayor from a secondary city in Germany, one of the main topics, the main messages was we need to empower cities and to recognize them as key actors and not only as beneficiaries or target group. And say this needs capacity building, it needs also legal competencies, and I think the water sector is an excellent example to say, okay, what is all needed? Starting from the fresh water provision, going to the wastewater treatment and doing sanitation. And the other point which I would like to say finally is, okay, the world is looking at the megacities, and many of us possibly have visited one and said, this is incredible. You fly half an hour and everything is built, but the bulk of the growth, the world population growth of these 2 billion people will go into the smaller cities and towns. It's them who have to cope with these challenges, and it's them who lack the necessary capacity, but also the necessary political support. So therefore, I also call upon all those who are political decision makers to make sure that there is not only the focus on the big ones, but say, okay, where are the big needs? Thank you.
Thank you very much also for recalling the importance of looking at cities of all size, including small and intermediary ones. I'll give the floor to our last speaker, Kobe.
Thank you very much. It's such an honor. Oh, yes, actually, Stefan.
Yeah, sorry, you're right. You're after Kobe.
Okay.
That's true.
Stefan.
The order because of the interpretation. You're right.
Thank you.
I've not forgotten.
Our good friends from Border. I think Border is an excellent example of exactly what's needed in Africa, because they are really working at the coalface with cities, downscaling solutions into communities and empowering communities to actually take action and build their own resilience as we're urbanizing at such a rapid rate in places like Africa and Asia. So, Stefan, so there's been a lot said already, yeah, and I agree with certainly, Hans, the sentiments that you shared, and the fantastic work of actually capturing the data and putting it out there so that we can better understand, on the one hand, the challenges, but on the other hand, also what cities are already doing. So in Africa, where I work, we're lucky to work with over 100 cities, and in most of them, we also work on water and sanitation, and I just want to raise a flag here for sanitation, wastewater. I think, there's a lot of potential for wastewater management in cities. We are seeing in the same cities, and I want to use one or two examples, but we are seeing in the same cities, sometimes in the same year, sometimes in the same season even, both terrible flooding, where you see losses of life, disrupting the local economies, disrupting families, that sort of thing. And in the very same season, you also see severe drought. So we are experiencing climate change in our African cities actually through water. Water is for us a common thread in terms of which we all relate to. It impacts our lives on a daily basis, and in terms of which mayors are making decisions. So I think African mayors are the majority of them at the forefront of this agenda are actually ready to take action, and they know what is needed. This was really very much coming to the fore through a declaration, which I think about 87 mayors made this year in March at our ICLEI C40 UCLG Water for Cities conference in Ekurhuleni, a big city in South Africa. They made the Ekurhuleni Declaration, where they're calling for action for water, addressing climate resilience through those action points. And I invite the mayors from Africa that are here and haven't yet signed it, please go on board and sign that declaration, put your voice to that. It will be represented to the African Union and the United Nations Secretary General during the course of this year and next year. But just to give an example, for instance, one of the cities we work in is Kampala. Kampala, for instance, is already experiencing that water provision is becoming more costly because of degradation of the ecosystem, because of shrinking water access through Lake Victoria. They've got to go deeper into the lake to extract water. That transportation cost is becoming higher, and the quality of the water is also going down. So those things that understand are linked to change, climate change, and they need to address this through more innovative nature-based solutions. That's one aspect. And just we don't have time to talk about the drought in Cape Town, where I live, but we're experiencing it on a daily basis. And just one point I want to make is that cities are also understanding the need, growingly so, that they are connected to the region. So in Cape Town, what the mayor and the leadership are doing there, they're addressing the drought issues through actually working with all the municipalities, large and small, in the entire region, looking at a basin approach, looking at a watershed sort of approach, and innovative ecosystem solutions. There's so many examples, and I'd like to share many of those with you. Unfortunately, we don't have time, but thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Kobe. I'm sure we can find more substance as need be on ICLEI's website. Stefan, you've got the last words.
Wow, fantastic. Thank you very much. So what an opportunity, and congratulations to everyone who made this Water Day during COP23 possible, because it's not a no-brainer to have water on the agenda here. So that's really fantastic. Now, point number 2, I don't think we have missing insight into how to do things. I was really pleased to hear all the combinations of large-scale solutions, bio-based solutions, examples from the cities, both from the keynotes we had and what I've heard here on the panel. So if we don't have an insight problem, we have probably an implementation challenge. And implementation means to me, I probably should not be sitting here, but out there and doing something. But on the other side, I think shared learning and fast-track learning will be the key in order to really bring those solutions out there. And this brings me to the last point. I'm representing here the Butterfly Effect NGO coalition, so representing a German NGO here in Germany, in Bonn. We are part of a global network of civil society organizations and civil society networks. We are taking the messages here from COP23 like we have been placing them in Marrakesh, and we go forward to World Water Forum 8 next year in Brasilia. We have a few statements for you, but everything I heard here, sanitation service delivery, water service delivery chain from the tap until reuse, but also the governance issue, very importantly, where we still have to improve. So we need support for civil society. We need support for public administrations. We need more collaborations. So we are around. Please involve us, involve civil society, so that we can have scaled and sustainable solutions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stefan. Another point, going back to the inclusiveness introduction. So thank you all. You've been very disciplined, which gives the opportunity maybe to take 1 or 2 interventions from the floor. If anyone wants to ask any question to either the panelists that are currently on the stage or any of the keynote in the previous moment, it's time to do it. you're given an opportunity to step in. If it's not a question, it can be an intervention or a reaction. So maybe if I take your mic, you have it? Good. I'll ask you to get closer, please, so you get the mic.
Thank you very much.
Introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Jonas. I work for a small Danish NGO, but I also used to be the resilience officer of a Danish city as part of the Rockefeller Foundation network. So my question to you is that, and thank you very much for all the presentations, but you make it sound very easy. And my question to you is, where are all the barriers? Where are all the problems? Where are all the challenges in this? Because I know in experience that from cities around the world that it's not easy to mobilize the investments. It's not easy to physically transform and change cities towards more resilience. So I would like to hear from people in the panel, what are the challenges that you are experiencing in transforming cities to becoming more blue, green, and resilient in the future?
Thank you very much. We don't need to have all respond, but maybe we'll start with Mark. If anyone else wants to take the floor, please signal yourself. That's also a question for the next panelists to keep in mind.
Yeah, I'll just start quite quickly, just to pick on one thing, because we've just talked about Cape Town. We had a huge drought in Australia, where we ended up with large-scale desalination, which was supported by the public until the rains came. And then all the politicians were being chastised for spending too much money. We immediately seemed to fall into a Californian drought where we hadn't shared any knowledge or learnt any lessons. We weren't prepared. We seem to wait until something hits us before we actually then do something about it. And I think if I would say anything, it's sharing that knowledge and that learning before something comes, and understanding the context in which it's happened. And we'd be better prepared if we'd just done that. And it's a start. I'm sure someone else has got something.
Thank you, Mark. Resilience also as how you move from crisis to risk management. Stefan?
A small addition. I mean, at times I feel in the uprun of conferences like these, there's so much critical comments that I didn't insist on even more problems. But thank you for asking for problems. So I would say, we are in many places and cities and towns in a catch-22 situation where existing legislation asks for very high discharge standards. I'm coming back to that sanitation wastewater example, right? Because it's most off-track business unfinished from the MDGs, for example, and a lot of methane coming from open ditches, nalas. I'm taking the example from India, where progress certainly is slow. It's happening. But existing discharge standards are kind of prohibitive, and what we need to adapt is an incremental approach, a phased approach, that we don't go from no wastewater treatment and full sledge going everywhere around to 100% treatment, because the discharge standards which claim levels more stringent than here in Bonn, right? So, but the reality is it's not happening. So if I'm starting to do some wastewater treatment, I would go to jail because it's not up to the standard. So everyone takes a kind of, okay, I'm not moving, I'm not doing any harm. So we have too ambitious legislation at times, and we need to find out how cities, without taking a legislatory risk or jurisdictional risk, can enter into a gradual improvement, following, for example, the United Nations principle of going gradually forward, right? So everyone according to the means they have, but the contradiction between very stringent legislation and no treatment happening on the ground is a prohibitive thing, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stefan, and I will invite all of you to give a big round of applause to our panelists for having been to the point and sticking to the rules of the game. Many thanks. While you join your seats, I will invite the second round of panelists to join me here, and I'm delighted to invite Mayor Frank Klipsch of Davenport in Iowa. Please have a seat. Madame Fatimetou Abdelmalik, maire de la commune de Tevra Zeina en Mauritanie, bienvenue. I will invite Kate Lamb, Head of Water Security at the Carbon Disclosure Project. Please join us. Kees van de Goot, also from Deltares in the Netherlands. Most welcomed. And last but not least, I have Fatimata Al-Suwaidi. Is Fatimata with us? I've not seen her. Okay, so that makes it shorter. And Paulo Sales. Paulo, please join us from Adasa in Brazil and co-chair of the 8th World Water Forum. I should have all the panelists for the second round. I want to say that one of the panelists will be, thank you for recalling that, talking in French, and that's Fatimata. So she will be the second speaker. And those of you who don't understand French, do they have headsets? Do you need, vous avez besoin? Oui. So maybe if we can bring, please, headsets for Fatimata, and then for the others, if you feel you will need, when Fatimata takes the floor, some interpretation, please, there's probably some material in the back that you can borrow for those few minutes. So very happy to have you all. Same format, same ideas, same multi-stakeholder and multi-country composition. The idea really is to cover as appropriate and as your experience reflects the different types of risks, whether they relate to too much, too little, too polluted water, whether they relate to, yeah. Where? Okay. Laisse regarder le bon canal, je n'ai pas l'info détaillée. I was going to say, so you can address any or all of the water risks, but if you can please keep in mind that the idea really is to extract some common messages on issues related to governance, to nature-based solutions, and to business and private sector participation. Keep that somewhere in your mind. It doesn't have to be all of it, but something that can help me also report back in a coherent way. So I'm very happy to hand over the floor to Fatimata first, because we have a constraint with the interpretation. You have the floor for 3 minutes. Should be fine.
Ok, bismillah, salatu salam ala rasulillah. Donc d'abord, je m'excuse parce que j'ai un gros rhume, mais c'est les effets des changements climatiques. Alors, moi, d'abord, je parle au nom de Cité Gouvernement Locaux Unis. Mais je vais présenter quand même ma commune et je vais parler un peu de ce qu'on fait en matière de résilience. Alors, moi, je viens d'un pays où le Sahel côtoie le Sahara, qui a connu des années de sécheresse répétées qui ont affecté le mode de vie des populations. Et je viens d'une ville où le désert vient rencontrer la mer. C'est beau comme ça, comme tableau, mais elle connaît énormément de vulnérabilités, notamment l'affleurement de la nappe d'eau et la construction sur des zones inondables, mais aussi l'absence de couvert végétal et l'avancée du désert, mais surtout les brèches, c'est les ruptures au niveau de l'océan qui menacent à chaque fois d'immersion marine. Alors, tout ça m'amène à dire, avec toutes ces vulnérabilités, m'amène à dire que l'eau est la vie, en fait. Et je suis parmi ceux qui pensent que les changements climatiques, la réduction des catastrophes dont on avait parlé tout à l'heure, et le développement durable, tout ça, c'est le même langage. Et la question d'eau, elle est transversale à tout ça, parce que, encore une fois, c'est la vie. Même dans notre jargon local, c'est une denrée de première nécessité. Et c'est un service qui ne peut pas souffrir de rupture. Donc, c'est ça qui fait que c'est un casse-tête pour les élus locaux, parce que la prise en charge est parfois coûteuse, mais elle est récurrente et c'est quelque chose qui demande de nous un effort très considérable. Alors, dans ma commune, il y a des quartiers qui ne sont pas, même si c'est le centre-ville, c'est la commune qui héberge, qui a les principales infrastructures socio-économiques du pays. Il y a des quartiers qui ne sont pas connectés au réseau d'eau et qui sont servis par des citernes. Et nous avons, pour un peu augmenter la résilience urbaine de nos populations, nous avons voulu requalifier une zone urbaine. C'est-à-dire que c'est, comme j'ai parlé tout à l'heure de la vulnérabilité, donc il y a des zones qui sont inondables et où l'eau, il y a des poches où l'eau reste pendant toute l'année. Et les oiseaux, notamment les oiseaux migrateurs, élisent souvent domicile dans ces poches-là. Nous avons voulu mettre à contribution, mettre à profit ces poches pour non seulement rendre notre ville, de lui donner une image avenante, mais aussi pour permettre à instaurer une culture environnementale au niveau de nos populations. Donc, augmenter la résilience urbaine de nos populations, c'est le travail des élus locaux. Et nous sommes mieux placés que quiconque pour le faire, parce qu'encore une fois, compte tenu de la proximité, compte tenu de cette relation intime qui nous lie avec les citoyens, nous pouvons les mobiliser d'abord, mais nous pouvons les conscientiser, mais nous pouvons surtout les amener à changer de comportement, notamment en matière de gestion d'eau, de gestion d'eau potable, notamment parce qu'encore une fois, c'est une denrée rare, et le traitement. Donc, dans le cadre de cette requalification, nous sommes en train justement d'augmenter la résilience à travers l'eau. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Fatimata. Thank you very much, Mayor, for sharing this concrete example of how you include the urban water resilience into your urban regeneration programs. And I think that's a very good lens at conveying water as an economic and sustainable development goal rather than a sectoral problem, and also for recalling how, as a mayor, you're directly exposed not only to the water risks, but also to the risks of backlash from your citizens if problems are not fixed or if crises are not managed upstream. So very interesting testimony. I will now give the floor to our second mayor in the panel. Would you like to stay here or you're comfortable there? Mayor of Davenport, you've got the floor.
Yeah, well, thank you. I am Mayor Frank Klipsch of the city of Davenport, Iowa. And as co-chair of the Mississippi River Cities and Towns Initiative, I think it's important that, which is an association of 80 cities and their mayors along the 5,000-kilometer Mississippi River. And you can see the picture up there on the screen as well. We go through 10 states, so we talk about collaboration. Not only are there 10 states, but half of them are in Illinois, on one side of the river and half of them are on the other side of the river. So multiple states, multiple municipalities, but interestingly, we've all come together, and I think that's extremely important. We really have a commitment to disaster resilience and adaptation program, which is a result of hard lessons learned over a short history of the association. The Mississippi River Valley sustained considerable disaster impacts from droughts, floods, extreme heat, tornadoes, totaling over $50 billion since 2011. So this isn't just on the coast or on major waterways that we think about, but the Mississippi River is also included. Our cities have experienced a 1,000-year rain event only 5 years after a 500-year flood. Disasters along the Mississippi River have cost above 8% of the region's economy, and in some cases at least 3% annually. Our strategy at the corridor level is comprised of 5 parts. Fund pre-disaster mitigation, as was mentioned in the previous panel. Increase the resilience capacity of the Mississippi River infrastructure and economic development projects. Restore ecological infrastructure on the corridor to better protect near water communities from floods, droughts, and other impacts that devastate the region. As an example, in Davenport, we didn't put up a flood wall, which many communities did, where they put up a flood wall and you end up passing the problems downriver to Arkansas and Missouri and Louisiana. We deal with it, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. Also, number 4 on our list is work with the 10 states to complete a multi-state disaster vulnerability assessment that aggregates the knowledge basis and the data thereof at that corridor level. So what's the problem? And it's not looking at what what Iowa and Davenport has a problem, but we have as a problem. And I think that works much better. And last, work with the private sector to increase mitigation and response capabilities throughout the valley. The natural infrastructure provided by the river ecology provides one of the most important protections from natural disasters. Natural infrastructure can play a tightened role in cleaning and moving the water, and can move and manage more water more efficiently to more benefit our built infrastructure than ever can. For instance, across the United States, inland wetlands provide an estimated $237 billion in water flow regulation services annually. The natural infrastructure of the Mississippi River Delta provides between 12 and 47 billion in benefits to the economy. So that's also extremely important as we move forward. Working with entities like the GEOS Institute, EcoAdapt, Tetra Tech, at the Federal Emergency Management Agency, the MRCTI is working to complete a multi-state disaster vulnerability assessment for the entire corridor. This assessment is designed to assemble state and federal data into determining where most vulnerable areas and populations are along our river that impacts the whole length of the river as a whole. We also developed and presented to our U.S. Congress $7.93 billion worth of natural infrastructure investment plan that supports 7 major industry sectors, creates nearly 100,000 jobs, and continues 1.5 million jobs, sustains our ecological assets to power our economy, mitigates for hundreds of millions of dollars in disaster impacts, and generates $24 billion. 6 out of 8 recommendations were actually realized in the most recent funding bill by U.S. Congress. So we have found with the current changes, we deal with the economy locally. And we're finding that if you have the right message, even at the national level, there is some resonance. And as we brought that forward. And locally, we have 9 miles of riverfront, so it's not just the water and the flood mitigation, but it's developable land in some form. We don't want to put something that's going to flood every year. So how do we, for instance, the Mississippi River comes out of its banks, we deal with it in the park settings and goes back in, and we can deal with that, but also we're developing interesting, unique things that are flood compatible and bring people to the river and enjoy it both from the land and from the water. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mayor. And to provide a continuity to the topic, if you allow me, I will move to Keith now, that is also going to address these issues of coastal and data cities and what they imply on those 3 cross-cutting items that the session is covering. Keith?
Thank you very much. My name is Kees van der Guchten, indeed, working with the Knowledge Institute Deltaris in the Netherlands, but jointly working with other low-lying countries around the globe in the Delta Alliance and Delta Coalition. And we'll face the same type of problems. Here we talk about cities, that's the session about, and cities is where it happens. Many cities are located in deltas, those low-lying areas along the coast. Most of our major megacities are over there. A third of the world population is living in low-lying countries and deltas. These are interesting cities because of economic activities. It's bearable land and very productive land for agriculture. It's an open access to transport along the coast and to other seas. It's an invitation for looking for new horizons. But it's not a place in isolation then. It's very much connected to the hinterland. It's connected through water. It's connected through food, through energy. The cities are part of this larger delta system. In that endeavor, urbanization still takes place at a rapid pace, but those deltas are not necessarily safe places. Water is coming from the rivers, water might come in from the sea, storm surges, etc. And under projected climate change, it might give vulnerable conditions. In the Netherlands and also in those other deltas we try to share, and the Mississippi example is also a good one to show off that investments in preventive measures, that they do pay back. It's preventing losses, it's showing that you are a safe place to invest in, a safe place to have a livable future. Then the question is how to connect those messages that we are, I think, jointly very well aware of, that are being talked about in the Bula zone these days. How to connect to the climate agenda. One of the entry points was provided by one of the speakers of UNISDR. It's through the formal commitments that countries already committed themselves to. Part of the SDG 11 is also dealing with disasters and indicators of the Sendai framework. Part of SDG 13, which is the climate one, also has national planning looking into the future for adaptation to climate change, and also holds the disaster risk reduction plans due in the coming 2 years, actually. These are entry points that we can very much use to have our politicians in the Bula zone to talk on the importance of water in sustainable city development. I might also refer to the background papers that have been made for these sessions, in which quite some interesting references are being made to this issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. Also for recalling the bridge with the climate community. We're making good progress from one COP to another, but we're not quite there yet. I mean, it's very striking to know there, how many people? 20,000, I mean, a bit less in COP23, and very hard to bring them to water-related discussions, right? I think there's probably a bit of homework to do there. I will now move from floods to droughts, and maybe give the floor to Paulo. Paulo, who's coming from ADASA, the network of regulators in Brazil, and also, as I was saying, co-chairing the 8th World Water Forum, and I think going to talk about the case of Brasilia and the recent droughts in your country that has long been perceived as water-rich and not very much concerned, if I may say so, about water crisis and demand management. Go ahead, Paulo.
Thank you, Aziza. Good afternoon to all. It's a pleasure for me to be here to talk a bit about Brasilia. Brasilia is now facing a water shortage, and of course, as usual, mostly strong affect poor people. But anyway, Brasilia was a planned city. It was founded in 1960, based on the best knowledge and science and technology available first from in the last decade of the 19th century and then in the middle of the 20th century. So the city was located in a place that had water in abundance, topography that was soft, soil fertile, climate mild, and everything from the natural infrastructure necessary to be resilient. But after 1970, it grew fast, very fast, and mainly in an uncontrolled way. Illegal occupation, invasions, cities without infrastructure and drainage systems, for instance, and in the top of rechargeable areas to underground water, and rivers and springs that disappeared. So today we have 3 million people living there, and 2 big reservoirs that should provide water for 85% of this population. The crisis that is now installed became stronger after 3 years of rainfall, low, much above or much less than the historical levels. And we had a big problem because of that. So the government didn't invest in new infrastructure for water during 15 years. Only 2015 ahead, there was some investments. So now we are trying to catch up. Let's say the government is finding new ways of bringing water. And ADASA, the local agency, regulatory agency for water and sanitation, has been using instruments to regulate both abstraction and consumption of water. And we also reviewed our authorizations for water, revised the regulation instruments, and give lots of investments to modernize our ITC instruments. IT instruments, for instance, for data monitoring, data bank, maps, underground water, and communication in general. So this is something that gave us a very good approach to the crisis. That will help us a lot. Well, the crisis is still there. We are facing the second year of heavy drought, and we are trying to recuperate this threatened resilience we had in the beginning of Brasilia. We are again using knowledge not only created by science and technology, but also based in experience, like Melbourne, for instance, in Australia, and particularly São Paulo and the northeastern part of Brazil. Recover plans, get the planning again as a basic thing for future activities, fighting illegal occupation that is still happening these days, and improving our legal and institutional framework, which is very important. And also these traditional things that people are doing, for instance, rainfall harvesting, reuse of water, and this type of thing. So all in all, the crisis has been really a good opportunity for us. And we learned a lot of that, learned with other experiences and learning by ourselves. And I would say, to finish, that the great challenge we have is to find means to build resilience in a dynamic system, because the system is a dynamic system. The city changes every day. In the case of Brasilia, we receive more or less 60,000 people per year that come to live in Brasilia. So it's very difficult to plan and to cope with this new population that is coming. And more difficult than that, or in order to make things even more difficult, I would say, is the fight to put the water as a priority within the public policies. This is not a tradition in Brazil, so then it's really hard to do that. And also, of course, change the culture that people traditionally had, that we have lots of water, we don't have to save water because water is like an infinite resource. We are learning that not only is finite, but also it is also spread above all the activities we do. And finally, I would like to invite you all to come to Brasilia for the 8th Forum. The 8th Forum will be in March 2018. And we expect many people. We have, is a very inclusive forum, and we have more than 500 entities working to create a nice set of sessions there. So please come and share your experiences with us as well.
Thank you very much, Paulo. Invitation taken, and I would like to testify of the change of approach in Brazil, just having completed a 2-year dialogue with the National Water Agency and over 100 stakeholders about moving from crisis to risk management and trying to see how economic instruments, abstraction and pollution charges, as you mentioned, can be not only a means to catalyze finance, but also a way to change behaviors. It's not easy to go to industry and farmers and tell them almost from one day to another that they have to catch up and pay. But there's definitely a momentum and political window to do so, and I think that the pathway ahead for Brazil is very promising. So we will conclude now with our last speaker. Thank you very much, Kate Lamb, for your patience, but I thought the data and investment angle that you were going to give was a very good way to wrap it up, because it cuts across the different risks we've seen.
Great, thank you, Aziza. So I wanted to start by asking you all a question. I'm not expecting you to shout out because it's a very personal question, but you know, how old, or to think to yourself, how old will you be in 12 years' time? I'll be 47, which, if you're wondering, I'm now 35. That's what it makes me. You know, in 12 years' time, we as a community globally need to leverage or have spent $93 trillion worth of cash to secure the water that we need. And that's just in water-related infrastructure alone. 93 trillion, that's not a small drop in the ocean, of course. Now, what I'm going to be talking to you today about is, in fact, still a drop in the ocean, but, you know, 12 years to raise that amount of money, we know for a fact that that amount of money is not going to come solely from the public purse, which is why I'm here to talk about the role, the critical role, really, that the private sector themselves will have to play, and in fact are starting to play in achieving a water secure world. There's not been much mention of the private sector today, really, certainly in its contribution to urban resilience. But if you think about the fact that all businesses rely on a strong, stable, healthy workforce, and on cities that can get their staff to their places of work on time within a fashion that is acceptable to them, where they're healthy and ready to work and be productive, it makes complete sense and a very clear and compelling business case that cities and both large-scale cities and small-scale cities can become a much more attractive proposition to these private sector organizations as they begin to secure their own water and become much more resilient. And the private sector is waking up to this particular issue. This year we have more than 2,000 companies worldwide. And these are companies from fashion to food, from cars to chemicals, from metals to, well, I'm trying to think of another M, but they're out there. You know, microchips that are waking up to the fact at the boardroom level that their water security is fundamentally at stake, and as a result, the business models that they have taken for granted and have implemented and foresee will still be successful in 50 years' time may actually not be the case anymore. And so they are starting a dialogue at the senior level that fundamentally looks at how resilient is our business model, where are we going to be located into the future, what products are we going to be growing, and what support is out there available to us to ensure that we can continue to achieve that success that we have become accustomed to. Now, we within the water conservation and water security community can leverage that interest to our own advantage, of course, because the only way that these businesses are going to be successful is if they invest in water security activities that not only benefit themselves, but ultimately fundamentally address water security issues within the basins and cities and towns upon which they rely. And excitingly, I've just launched a report this week, where we analysed the types of interventions that companies are now making today. So we looked at about 750 companies from all around the world, and collectively they've now committed to investing $24 billion just in this year alone to improve their water-related activities. Now, some of that investment is within the fence line, so it's looking at increasing water recycling, better monitoring and metering, but excitingly, there are interventions that go far beyond the fence line. These are, there's a particular Japanese company that is investing in a huge amount of reforestation in Japan in order to protect and enhance the natural infrastructure that ultimately fundamentally addresses their water-related needs. We have companies that are changing the chemical makeup of their pharmaceuticals so that when they're used by the population, by us, in increasing amounts, that they're flushed through our bodies and back into the water systems, that they pose a significantly lower threat to water quality issues. That is systemic change on a level that we should be really excited about, and I personally am very motivated by that. I think the real opportunity resides in bringing these different communities together, so cities, investors, and companies. And CDP has created a program called Matchmaker, where we're attempting to bring together the cities that are disclosing to us, and Mayor Klipsch is one of those cities, with our institutional investors to ensure that where there are opportunities for investment, to further investment, that those opportunities are realised. So I will stop there in the interest of time, but if you would like further information, then please see myself or my colleague Katie in the audience. Thank you.
Very interesting, that role of facilitator and intermediary on top of the traditional role we have in mind for the private sector. Thank you very much. And please join me thanking all the panel. Again, I see it's actually 25 to 5. We're running 5 minutes late, but we started 10 minutes late. So I want to give a chance if someone wants to step in, make a point, ask a question, make a statement, express a contradiction. Not the speakers, outside the speakers. Okay, so if this is not the case, then I will invite our panelists to go back to their seats, and thank you very much to all for your contribution to this discussion. I will not do the wrap-up because I will do it in the plenary with the other two dialogues. So I would invite those of you who can afford to stay for the next hour and a half. It's starting at 4:45. Is it here, Alexandros? It's here. Okay, so you've got some time for a stretch, coffee break, and we're back in 10 minutes. Thank you very much.